Democrats to remove some of or replace some of the slaver art, like the depictions of slavers and Confederates here in the Capitol. As Speaker, you have a lot of power over the artwork that gets displayed in this building. Is that something you're thinking?
Well, I remember when the Democrats brought up removing of a couple statues. I thought they should have gone further. Because the interesting part is I think they should change the name of their own party. Because when you think about it, every statue that came was voted on by a state legislature that was a Democrat majority, that was sent to Congress as a Democrat majority accepted it. There's not one Republican that you have to take down. There's not one Republican in the process. Remember how our party created. Our very first president was Abraham Lincoln. The greatest challenge ever to our Constitution was the Civil War. But I think if the Democrats are truthful about moving forward on what they want to remove, they should remove the name of their party as well, because that was the name that they provided and circled around and moved forward. So, look, I'm very proud. You come into my office, Joseph Rainey, first black American ever.
Congress, we were able to get signed into law just in December the Improving Government for American Taxpayers Act. We hope that we can get the executive branch to act on your recommendations and probably save taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. So I just want to begin by thanking you for that. Mr. Horowitz, it seems that there's likely tens of billions of dollars in PPP loan fraud that has yet to be uncovered. Is that fair?
There is likely tens of billions.
Some estimates are as high as 100 billion, but we can just agree on tens of billions. That's fine. It seems to me that you have all of the information necessary at your disposal to identify this fairly rapidly. You look at the Q4, you get the business tax ID number, and you compare the Q4 withholdings for W-2 employees versus the amount of the PPP loan, and then the Q2 and Q3 of 2020 withholdings. And there should be an algorithm or some sort of a proportionality between those different numbers. So that should be some sort of a report that you can run, and then you can just start arresting people. Is that not how this should happen?
There might be a little more sophistication to it, perhaps,
Why?
but let me just say, we don't have access to that data.
What do you need from Congress to, because it's literally a report. You should be able to run a report on those 4 data points, and then you're going to get tens of thousands of businesses that got PPP loans fraudulently, because if the metrics don't match up, then they lied and they stole and they need to go to jail. So what do you need?
A clear congressional action in legislation that says that. It took us, the fraud alert we issued this week, matching our information, and all we did was send name, date of birth, and social to the Social Security Administration and said, don't send us back your data, just give us yes, no answers. Are these the real names? It took us 10 months to do that.
Again, we agreed that the Q4 withholdings of 2019 and the Q2 and the Q3 withholdings of 2020, plus the amount of the PPP loan, those numbers should have a proportional correlation that we can all agree is fairly straightforward. It's going to be up and down a little bit depending on how much your rent is, what your utilities are, but those numbers should all match up. And if there's a huge discrepancy in whatever that correlation is, then they probably stole and it was fraudulent. So do you just need us to force everybody to create that report?
What we need is access to data. It's what the controller said about just the death master file index.
I don't even think you need access to data. You need that report run, and you need to have all the list and the discrepancy and the correlation of those 4 metrics, and then you need to go and start putting people in jail.
We need the data analytics platform to continue, and we need access to all of this data, and Congress has to legislate that.
Do you need access to the data, or do you just need Treasury to run a report?
They won't run the report unless it's clear
We
we have
can make
access.
them. We
unless
can make them
have-
run the report.
That's what we would need as well then. That's
I'm
correct.
sure that this is not a partisan issue. If people stole tens of billions of dollars in COVID relief, possibly denying benefits to people that actually needed it, those people need to be held accountable. And the fact that here we are years later, and we still have not done something that should literally be as simple as running a report in a computer at the Treasury Department. I mean, you just need us to pass a law making them do that.
We need a law. We would love to get employer identification number information. to see
Why-
if it-
why would
to
Treasury
see if
not do
somebody
this?
actually exists.
Why would Treasury not do this?
Because there's federal laws like Section 6103 of the tax code that restricts sharing of tax information. We're now not talking just for the public's benefit, not individual income tax returns, what we're talking about, but 6103 is written broadly for a variety of very good reasons to limit where that information and tax information.
All right, well, look, there's four.
So the co-chair of our Second Amendment caucus here in Congress.
Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to thank my friend and fellow Freedom Caucus colleague and proven fighter for the Second Amendment, Mr. Clyde, for organizing this special order. Thank you so much for highlighting what's going on here. Mr. Speaker, the ATF's new pistol brace rule violates the separations of powers. Bureaucrats don't create laws. Congress does. This rule functions like a law that Congress never passed. ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. In Western Colorado, we call that a fun weekend. But DC bureaucrats have used this agency to infringe on the rights of the American people. When you research how many pistol braces the ATF expects to be registered, the number varies. Some say 10 million, others say 20 million, and it still may even be 40 million. Why such disparity? Because the ATF doesn't know how many are out there, because law-abiding Americans do not trust them enough to tell them. In fact, there's probably going to be many more boating accidents this spring and summer than we've ever encountered in U.S. history from law-abiding gun owners. We don't trust the ATF because of their overreaching actions, exactly like we're seeing with this rule. There's been a lot of talk about defunding the ATF, even abolishing the agency altogether. And I'm still waiting to hear a good reason why the ATF should remain an agency at all. And yet I've yet to hear one. Instead of providing regulations that keep our communities safe, this agency has made our communities more dangerous by laundering weapons to the cartels. Operation Fast and Furious exposed the recklessness of the ATF, how little regard they have for the rule of law, and Americans have had a hard time viewing these agencies and its rules as legitimate. Think about it. The ATF had about 1,700 firearms that were being tracked. They had tracers on them that they were selling to known criminals during this Operation Fast and Furious. They lost 1,700 traced firearms. And now they expect to go after law-abiding American citizens for firearm accessories? Are they really that competent to go after this many millions of Americans for a firearm accessory, a stabilizing brace, when they had 1,700 tracked firearms in the hands of known criminals that they just lost? I think.
Hageman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In today's America, conservatives are constantly under attack. Attempts to silence us take many forms and are perpetuated by numerous people, agencies, and corporations. Conservatives are more often audited by the IRS, and conservative organizations are more often denied tax-exempt status than are liberals. This is an indisputable fact and has been happening at least since the Obama administration. This is in part the reason why voting to stop the hiring of 87,000 new IRS agents was so critical. Conservatives are more often investigated and harassed by the Department of Justice than are liberals. The DOJ has even gone so far as to seize the cell phone of a sitting congressman. It has raided residences of conservatives while ignoring liberals whose actions are far worse. And it has aggressively advocated for holding right-leaning Americans in jail without due process. How many liberals have been banned or shadow banned on Facebook, Twitter, Google, and other social and digital media sites? Scores of conservatives have been so banned, including our former president. How many times do we see the so-called fact checks on the social media posts of conservatives while never seeing them on the posts of liberals? These fact checks have covered such topics as COVID, climate change, gun rights, crime, and actions of protesters. The fact checks are dubious at best and downright dishonest at worst. Financial platforms such as PayPal, Venmo, and GoFundMe routinely refuse service to or censor conservatives. In the past year alone, GoFundMe has taken down fundraisers for Kyle Rittenhouse, conservative students at Arizona State University, and from the Freedom Trucking Convoy after having raised $9 million. Finally, just this last week, we saw that YouTube and Facebook have censored Project Veritas in some of the most important investigative research that we've seen come out of a media company. While all of this sounds like an impossibility to overcome, we must fight to end this bias.
Doesn't question whether a plane really smashed into the Pentagon on 9/11. She does not wonder if school shootings in America are staged. She has not propagated the absurd notion that space lasers, financed by the Rothschild family, are the cause of wildfires in California. She has never equated vaccine mandates with Adolf Hitler. And she has never, ever expressed support for executing leaders of the United States Congress. Now, being a conspiracy theorist alone is not grounds for removal from committees, I'll admit that. But depicting violence or supporting violence against fellow members of Congress is grounds for removal, be it a Democrat or a Republican. But no one has accused Representative Omar of depicting or supporting violence against anyone in this chamber. So why will 90% of Jewish members of the United States House of Representatives vote to maintain her committee assignment? Quite simply, because we believe in the human capacity to learn from mistakes, to make amends, and that atonement should be rewarded, not punished. We also believe that the most dangerous acts by elected officials in a democracy are to silence voices of dissent, even those with which we fundamentally disagree. And that's what this is about, silencing and canceling. How ironic. Furthermore, this is the very weaponization of anti-Semitism that I, as a Jewish person, find repulsive, I find dangerous, and above else, shameful. Yes, shameful. So to my friends across the aisle, if you really are sincere about defeating anti-Semitism in America, how about ask us? How about ask us what we need? And let me assure you, you might be surprised by the answer. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Reserve.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania reserves, and the gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes from the representative from the great state of Tennessee, Mr. Kustoff.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the resolution to remove Congresswoman Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee for her anti-Semitic speech, comments, and rhetoric. No doubt, words have meaning. When a member of Congress stands in this chamber, or at home, or in their district, the nation and the world pays attention to what they say and how they say it. When a member of Congress makes hateful and anti-Semitic remarks, they're amplified. They are magnified. Even more so when that member sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The committee tasked with helping set policy and providing oversight over our nation's relationship with Israel and with Jewish communities around the world, it is imperative that this body not only speaks against anti-Semitism, but also holds accountable those who spread such hateful beliefs. As our nation's leaders, we have the ability and the responsibility to help combat anti-Semitism and ensure that our children, tomorrow's leaders, are taught that such rhetoric is unacceptable. Let's be clear, anti-Semitism has no place in the halls of the Congress, nor in our national conversation, and I stand here today in solidarity with the Jewish community to send a strong message that the United States House of Representatives does not tolerate such behavior.
It doesn't say that. It says each hearing. This is the first hearing.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm happy to lead it if you'll designate me.
Mr. Chairman.
The amendment that was adopted said that we may start hearing with the Pledge of Allegiance. If the gentleman is insisting on doing that, I would welcome Mr. Cicilline to lead the Judiciary Committee in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I thank the gentleman for leading us in the pledge. Would now start with our opening statements. 4.5 million, that's the number of illegal aliens encountered by CBP officials just in the time since President Biden took office. 1.7 million, the number of illegal migrants that Joe Biden released into American communities. 2,378,944, the number of illegal migrants encountered by CBP on the southwest border in 2022. The highest number ever recorded in a single year in our nation's history. 251,487, the number of illegal migrants encountered by CBP on the southwest border in the month of December of last year. The highest monthly number ever recorded. 8,100, the average number of illegal migrants encountered per day on the southwest border in the month of December 2022. 717,660, the number of illegal migrant encounters on the southwest border in just the first 3 months of this fiscal year. 1.1 million, the number of known gotaways who have successfully crossed the southwest border since President Biden took office. 856, the number of migrants who died attempting to cross the southwest border during the past fiscal year. Again, the highest number on record. 98, the number of aliens on the terrorist watch list encountered on our southwest border during fiscal year 2022, yet another record set by the Biden administration. Remember when Mr. Mayorkas testified in front of this committee last Congress, and we asked him about the number on that terrorist watch list? I remember asking Mr. Mayorkas, at the time it was only 40-something. We asked him about that number. He said, what's the status of those individuals? And his response, I think, was astonishing to every member of the committee, both Republican and Democrat, when he said he didn't know. He didn't know if they were detained, he didn't know. This year, 38, the number of aliens on that terrorist screening database, already this year. 193, the number of fentanyl-related deaths in the United States every single day. We're going to hear from Mr. Dunn and the heartache this causes families and communities, this fentanyl problem. These numbers make clear that the Biden administration does not have operational control of the border. Month after month after month, we have set records for migrants coming into the country. And frankly, I think it's intentional. I don't know how anyone with common sense or logic can reach any other conclusion. It seems deliberate, it seems premeditated, it seems intentional. And as if that's not bad enough, we now learn that the crisis is no longer just confined to the southwest border. Last week, the chief Border Patrol agent in Vermont tweeted this, quote, in less than 4 months, Swanton sector's apprehensions have surpassed the combined 2 prior years. Just in the past 4 months, more than the 2 years combined beforehand. Make no mistake, the Biden administration is carrying out its plan. We all heard Secretary Mayorkas sat in front of this committee and said, we are executing our plan on the border. And we all heard President Biden say, we're trying to make it easier for people to get here. Well, they're certainly succeeding in that. Imagine the frustration that our border communities feel when they hear that the damage done to their land and to their businesses, the crimes committed by illegal alien trespassers, and the overwhelmed local resources that are all part of their own federal government's plan. Today, we will hear about some of the effects of Biden's open border policies on everyday Americans and the communities in which they live. We will hear about dangerous encounters with illegal migrants on private property. We will hear about the devastating effects, as I said earlier, of fentanyl on American families. And we will hear about Mexican smuggling cartels exploiting the open border to terrorize U.S. communities. And the worst part is that none of this had to happen. Under President Trump, the border was secure. Under President Biden, there is no border. And Americans are paying the price. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, once he completes his phone call, for his opening statement.
I thank the chairman for yielding. I wish this committee was starting off on a different note. Unfortunately, this hearing is more of the same haphazard, chaotic style we have come to expect of this new Republican majority. We saw them take 15 tries to pick a speaker. We saw them fumble on the opening play by needing to reschedule their first meeting. And now this. The first hearing will showcase the racist tendencies of the extreme MAGA Republican wing of the party that seeks to close the border to refugees from places like Cuba and Venezuela. It almost makes me miss their usual obsession with conspiracy theories and the FBI. Furthermore, this hearing appears to be the latest spat in an ongoing turf war between Chairman Jordan and Chairman Comer. As we all know, Chairman Jordan's plans for his select subcommittee cut deeply into Chairman Comer's jurisdiction. Not to be outdone, Chairman Comer announced that the Oversight Committee will hold its first hearing on the subject of immigration, a topic that is squarely in this committee's jurisdiction during the week of February 6th. Turning the tables on Chairman Comer once again, our majority hastily threw together today's hearing to ensure that we beat the Oversight Committee by a few days, without the government witnesses that the Oversight Committee had time to secure, of course. I suspect this hearing is also an attempt to distract from the fact that Republicans have failed to pass any meaningful legislation in their first month in the majority. As we all know, as part of the rules package for the House, Majority Leader Scalise included 11 ready-to-go, in quotes, pieces of legislation that were set to completely bypass regular order. Many of those fell under the purview of the Judiciary Committee. It appears, however, that these bills were anything but ready to go. Republicans are unable to pass 4 of the bills that were exclusively or partially under this committee's jurisdiction. Most relevant to today's hearing is H.R. 29, the Border Safety and Security Act of 2023. This legislation has been described as, quote, not Christian, anti-American, and trying to ban legitimate asylum claims. And those are not my words. Those are the words of Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez of Texas. And he's not the only one. According to the Washington Post, dozens of Republican lawmakers have raised concerns about the scope of this legislation. Now let's turn to today's hearing. There is no doubt that the majority and their witnesses will use the same extreme rhetoric we have come to expect from them. They will tell us that the southern border is open, that President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas opened it deliberately, and that it is mostly migrants who are smuggling drugs across our southern border. Of course, none of those statements are true. Yes, significant numbers of individuals are arriving at our southern border, but the Biden administration actually expelled over 1.1 million people last year and recently expanded the use of Title 42, much to the concern of many of us here on the committee. Additionally, the vast majority of drugs we seize are encountered at ports of entry. In fiscal year 2022, only 17% of illicit drugs, including 15% of all fentanyl, were seized between points of entry by the Border Patrol. The rest was seized by the Office of Field Operations, who are stationed at ports of entry. The evidence does not show that asylum seekers are bringing drugs to our shores. In fact, increasingly, drug cartels are recruiting American citizens to bring drugs across the border through ports of entry. We all agree that our immigration system is broken, but let's fix the problems where they are, and not where Fox News talking heads imagine them to be. Sadly, at every turn, this extreme Republican majority fails to offer genuine solutions and resorts to political theater. Our colleagues across the aisle cannot even negotiate in good faith with each other, let alone with us. If that changes, if House Republicans can get their act together and work with us on meaningful solutions to serious problems, as Senate Republicans appear to be willing to work with Senate Democrats, then Judiciary Committee Democrats stand ready to help. But given their behavior these past few months, I have my doubts. Republicans have proposed building a wall, shutting down the asylum system, and defunding the Department of Homeland Security. Those are not serious proposals. They may well play with the extremist base, but they are a waste of this committee's time, and the American people deserve better. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today. I would also like to take a moment and express my condolences to Mr. Dunn and his family. I cannot imagine how difficult the loss of your son has been for you and your wife. Thank you for being here today. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize our witnesses for today's hearing. I want to thank them for being here. First, I want to yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, to introduce one of our witnesses today.
I thank the chairman. I wish that it were under different circumstances, but I am certainly proud to have a fellow Texan here willing to share the story that he is going to share with us here today. I visited at length with Brandon Dunn and his lovely wife, Janelle Rodriguez. They live in Hays County, Texas, where I live. They live a few miles down the road, and they have 4 children today, and Mr. Dunn will recount the loss of their son Noah last summer. They are a testament to wanting to get positive change out of a loss and working hard to do that. And I'm delighted to have them here to express what they're going to share about the impact of open borders. Hardly a lie, hardly a figment of our imagination, a real impact on real human beings every single day. And they're going to share that here today, and I thank them for coming here. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Arizona to introduce the sheriff with us today. Mr. Biggs is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to introduce to the committee one of the finest lawmen in America, certainly one of the finest lawmen in Arizona, Sheriff Mark Daniels from Cochise County, Arizona. Cochise County is a large county with a fairly sparse population, but sits right on the border. It's in southeast Arizona, borders New Mexico and Mexico. And Sheriff Daniels encounters the reality of what's happening on the border, unlike those who reside in New York who say there is no problem on the border and that the border, to say that the border is open is untrue. We will hear contrary testimony today. It is open, the border is dangerous, drugs pour across, international terrorists, criminal gang members, people from all over the world, indeed over 150 nations, have come through. We can't even vet most of those individuals. Sheriff Daniels has served his county for a long time. He does a great job, works well with the Border Patrol agents, and has devised a program to protect the communities that he serves in that wonderful southeastern Arizona county, which is a big county. And so we're going to hear more from him, and I'm excited to have him here. He's not only a great advocate, great sheriff, a great family man, but he's a good friend of mine. Sheriff Daniels. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar, for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my privilege to introduce to the Judiciary Committee and to the American public a dear friend of mine and a great leader with whom I share much in common, County Judge Ricardo Samaniego. He is the El Paso County Judge, and we have a couple of things in common. I served as El Paso's County Judge for many years in my time preceding my service in Congress. And for those unfamiliar with Texas elected politics, a county judge is essentially the chief elected official, the county administrator in Texas, and they're referred to as judge, even though in many ways they act as the mayor of the entire county. And so Judge Samaniego and I both have been county judge of one of the safest communities in the United States of America, and it is on the U.S.-Mexico border. It is a longtime recipient of migrant populations at our nation's front door, and we are incredibly proud of the role that we play in upholding American values in a way that provides for dignity. Judge Samaniego and I also share another thing in common. We were born and raised and are proud residents of the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas. Judge Samaniego has done a number of things prior to serving in county government. He has been in small business. He has been in human resources. He has been, I think, in the juvenile justice world as well. But Judge Samaniego is here to talk to us about how communities on the border like El Paso have actually been of tremendous service to the federal government. And when given the resources and support, they can be a great ally in ensuring that we preserve the humanity in our system that all of us should want. One last thing that I will say, Judge Samaniego and I both were in public service, I as a congresswoman and Judge Samaniego as the county judge, on a horrific day, August 3rd, 2019, when a domestic terrorist drove over 10 hours to our community to slaughter Mexicans and immigrants, and he used much of the hateful, racist, bigoted, xenophobic language this domestic terrorist did, as many politicians in Washington, D.C. use, as many politicians in Texas use, and unfortunately, as the President of the United States at the time used. He was inspired by that hateful rhetoric, and he used it to fuel his hatred and massacre 23 people in a Walmart in our community. So our words have power. I want to remind our committee of that. Our words have consequences. Judge, thank you for being here. It is a privilege to have you here.
I thank the gentlelady from Texas. Our fourth witness could not be with us today because of the ice storm in Texas. Judge Dale Lynn Carruthers is a county judge and fourth-generation rancher in Terrell County, Texas. She was a lifelong Democrat but switched parties because of the devastating effects of the Biden border crisis on her land and her community. Her testimony was circulated to committee members, but I will briefly summarize her testimony because of what she was going to say, I think is too important for the American people not to hear. Judge Carruthers would have testified that their once safe community now lives in fear. Neighbors' homes have been burglarized, ranchers have been stalked on their own lands, and high-speed car crashes and chases are a daily hazard. One of Judge Carruthers' neighbors even had his home set on fire by illegal migrants who did so in order to get law enforcement to come and pick them up. Her county's limited resources have been overwhelmed because of the flow of illegal aliens across the border. The local high school has had to be locked down due to the criminal activity in their community. Illegal aliens routinely trespass through Ms. Carruthers' land, cutting her fences and causing other damage to her property. And groups of illegal migrants regularly dress in camouflage to cross the judge's and her neighbor's land. These are not asylum seekers looking to turn themselves into Border Patrol agents, but foreign nationals trying to evade law enforcement. We wish she would have been able to be here today to share her story in person, but we do welcome our witnesses who are here, who were able to travel and are here, and we thank you for appearing. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize the testimony in 5 minutes. I know you were told this earlier. The microphones in front of you have a clock and a series of lights. When the light changes from green to yellow, you should begin to conclude your remarks. It's pretty basic. Green means go, yellow means get ready to stop, red means stop. Mr. Dunn, you may begin, and we again thank you for being here, the work you and your wife are doing in your foundation, and like everyone on the committee, we are sorry for the loss of your son. Mr. Dunn, you got your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for having me here today. I'm the co-founder of the Forever 15 Project, a nonprofit that my wife Janelle and I started after the passing of our son Noah. On August 21st, Noah died as a result of fentanyl poisoning. More specifically, illicit fentanyl poisoning. He was 15 years old. He was a sophomore at Johnson High School in Hays County. He was murdered by a drug dealer selling counterfeit Percocet pills. pill he took contained 8 milligrams of fentanyl, which is 4 times the lethal dose. There was no Percocet in the pill. There were no other drugs in the pill besides illicit fentanyl. Noah was the 3rd victim in less than 2 months in Hays County from illicit fentanyl. Kevin McConville, another Hays student, passed away from a counterfeit Xanax that contained illicit fentanyl. And Ryan Garcia, also of Hays CISD, passed away from a counterfeit Percocet pill. Since then, we've attended many seminars and summits, one by the DEA in Houston, Texas. So now we're very familiar with all of the information regarding illicit fentanyl. Illicit fentanyl is primarily manufactured in Mexico by the drug cartels and smuggled through our southern border. And it is true that most seizures happen at border checkpoints. I believe 60% of all fentanyl seized last year was in San Diego and Imperial Valley. However, due to the lethality of this drug, any amount smuggled in a backpack or a fanny pack or even in somebody's pocket can be enough to kill thousands of people. So as you can see, it's not just a border checkpoint issue. Any amount over, I would probably under 1 milligram could be lethal in some instances, but 2 milligrams is the most common number put out there. And without immediate medical intervention, a person is not likely to survive. That's how fast it kills. In our activism work, we've come across several families that have also lost their children to this illegal drug or this illicit drug. And it's both sides of the political aisle. For us, this isn't a political issue. This is an issue about the safety of our children and the citizens of this country. We're working with several state legislatures who are primarily Democrats in our area on legislation to stop this from happening as well. So it's a definite problem that's impacting our communities. I don't have time to read the names, but in the 5 months since Noah's passing, we've met 28 other families who've lost primarily teenagers to this drug. The current statistic is it's the #1 killer from 18 to 45. Honestly, we believe that next year that number will probably drop to 15 to 45. And we've had some children as young as 13 years old die from this drug. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. We appreciate you and your wife being here today. Sheriff, recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Honorable Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and distinguished members of this committee. I appreciate the opportunity to address this committee regarding the status of our southern border from the optics of a community and local law enforcement perspective. I have served our border communities for 38 plus years, and prior to that as a member of the United States Army. I currently serve on national, western, and southwest border sheriff associations, and we have 3 objectives: public safety, national security, and humanitarian. In my submitted brief, I have shared with you all the overview of Cochise County and the history of our border. I have personally experienced the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a border county. Currently, this is the ugliest I've experienced. I am proud of our relationships with our local law enforcement partners, local, state, and federal, that serve our communities. To best understand my presentation is to understand we were over 2 years ago. My county was one of the safest border counties based on our collective government efforts, messaging, and yes, enforcement operations supported by the rule of law. What's the direct impact to my county? My citizens and law enforcement address mostly gotaways, the fight and flight syndrome in my county versus those giving up. 100% camouflage migrants being illegally smuggled by the cartels with the price tag of per undocumented alien begins at $7,000 and up. These smugglers include juveniles being recruited via social media by the cartels, border-related bookings, detention costs within my jail in calendar year 2022 was $4.3 million, absorbed by my local and state taxpayers. Border-related crimes are at an all-time high. Death, murder investigations, aggravated acts against my citizens, failure to yields, search and rescue, plus recoveries, and yes, assaults against law enforcement officials. My deputies have been placed in life-threatening scenarios as the cartels show no regard for my citizens and those that wear a badge. Agents, troopers, deputies, and officers are addressing dangerous scenarios and criminals as a direct result of an open border being exploited by the criminal cartels for violence, fear, and greed. In calendar year 2022, 1,578 suspects were booked in my jail for border-related crimes. Only 78 were foreign-born. In 2021, over 5 million dosages of fentanyl were seized on the Arizona border. In 2022, over 20 million dosages were seized. In 2022, over 12,000 pounds of fentanyl was seized on the southwest border. I want to share a personal tragedy with you of a good citizen named Wanda in my county. She was heading to her 65th birthday party to meet her family and her son when a 16-year-old USC who fled from law enforcement, the deputies, was carrying 3 undocumented aliens, ran his vehicle through a red light at deadly speeds, cutting her vehicle in half and killing her. In closing, my fellow sheriffs and I have tried to partner with this administration to include the President of the United States with high hopes to share a collective message, a collective action plan, support the rule of law, prioritize our southern border, and provide updates reference community impacts and concerns with little to no success. By allowing our border security mission and immigration laws to be discretionary, these criminal cartels continue to be the true winners. Their exploitation of mankind is simply modern-day slavery, allowing thousands of pounds of illicit drugs into our country and that continue to erode core values of families, schools, and subsequently killing an average of 300 Americans every day is unacceptable at any level. Experiencing migrant deaths without a reasonable process why members of U.S. Congress and this administration intentionally avoid reality is gross negligence. Our voice of reason has been buried during what I call intellectual avoidance by this administration and, yes, members of U.S. Congress. Communities have been neglected and banded rely on our own local and state resources to address border that is in a crisis mode. Our southern border, against all public comfort statements out of Washington, D.C., is the worst shape I've ever seen it. When I look at public safety, national security, and humanitarian on our southern border, this is the largest crime scene in this country. The morale of agents is extremely low, and the collective frustration is very high amongst law enforcement at all levels, and most important, the citizens of my county. With the recent efforts to cancel Title 42, this only serves to complex a border that needs immediate immigration reform by U.S. Congress, but most important, needs to be secured. I'm a true believer that Customs and Border Patrol are the experts of border security, while sheriffs and police chiefs are the experts of community. Together, this is a recipe of success for all communities. I will leave you with this final statement. We all serve the priorities of Americans based on our shared oath of office to keep them safe, enhance their quality of life, and support the rule of law, absent political affiliation or the concern of re-election. I ask each one of you to reflect on this statement as you make your next decision to vote. Once again, I thank this committee for the invitation and opportunity, and now stand ready to answer any questions here in a few minutes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now recognize Judge Samaniago. I think I got that right. Judge, thank you for being here. You got your 5 minutes. Just hit your mic.
Members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you for inviting me to testify. My name is Ricardo Samaniego. I'm an elected county judge of El Paso, Texas.
Judge, can you pull that a little closer? Would you
Pardon me?
Pull that a little closer. The whole, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. El Paso, Texas, one of the safest, largest communities in America and the veterans capital of the USA, where I serve a population almost 900,000 residents in a metroplex consisting of El Paso, Texas, Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and Las Cruces, New Mexico. These 3 cities form a combined international metropolitan area of 2.7 million individuals and constitutes the largest bilingual and binational workforce in the Western Hemisphere. I would like to start by emphasizing that over 4 years ago, Customs and Border Patrol requested the assistance of myself and other local officials. I believe we truly stepped up to the request and facilitated their internal processes. El Paso, Texas has been the epicenter of the migrant surge both recently and nearly 4 years ago, when border communities such as mine were faced with unprecedented numbers of migrants who were seeking to enter our country through El Paso. We have learned how to safely, humanely, and expeditiously treat asylum seekers who pass through our community on their way to unite with sponsors. I'm here today to share the El Paso story, a success story which strikes delicate balance between security and compassion. However, before I tell you the story, I must disabuse you of information which I personally know to be false. There is no open border in El Paso. Immigrants seeking asylum largely present themselves to Border Patrol for processing. El Paso is required to abide by the same immigration laws that other border communities must follow. There is no invasion of migrants in our community, nor are there hordes of undocumented immigrants committing crimes against citizens or causing havoc in our community. Claiming this continues a false, racist narrative against these individuals or perpetuates violence that the El Paso community is all too familiar with. When our citizens were target of a racially motivated mass shooting August 3rd, 2019, they killed 23 El Pasoans and Mexican citizens and wounded 26 other innocent bystanders. Our community was deeply devastated by this tragedy. Thirdly, humanitarianism and security are not binary choice. It is the federal government's responsibility to do both. Provided with a sufficient financial support, we can assist the federal government in fulfilling its mandate. Our initiatives, efforts, and processes are directed to avoid any type of chaos. When El Paso County was faced with the increasing number of asylum seekers, we established a Migrant Support Service Center to assist migrants to connect with their relatives and sponsors and guide them with a same-day self-paid travel arrangement process. Approximately 35 to 45% of these migrants fall in this category. The benefit of this process is that migrants are moved quickly and safely out of our community at their own expense. The center opened on October the 10th, 2022, and has a capacity to assist up to 1,000 per day. To date, the center has assisted 26,829 asylum seekers. No immigrant is placed on a bus and shipped to another city without coordination and a sponsor waiting at the receiving city. El Paso's partnership with Catholic Charities of Houston is a great example of interjurisdictional cooperation with federal funds. Catholic Charities chartered a bus daily traveling from El Paso to Houston with 52 passengers, manifested with confirmed self-paid travel for flights out of Houston the following day. This model initiated discussions with collaboration with other interstate and intrastate partners such as Dallas, Austin, and Denver. When the city of El Paso declared a disaster, we did not get the resources we needed, but instead saw the state of Texas National Guard, the placement of barbed wire lined haphazardly in certain areas, and pseudo barriers of tanks and cargo containers were put up. Prior to the city's declaration, I had sent correspondence and communicated with various state officials that what my community needed was assistance with transportation, staffing, food, and sheltering. The state never addressed these needs that we requested. To be sure, we cannot locally resolve the immigration issues facing our country. So I finally want to take the opportunity to thank our Congresswoman, Veronica Escobar, for her leadership and for consistently ensuring that the federal government is aware of the realities on the ground. So I thank you for being here. I welcome you to our beautiful community. I would love to host, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dunn, I know the list of names of people who, in many cases, thought they were taking one drug and died of fentanyl is long. One of the names that you probably have on your list is Matt Capolato in Riverside County, and his daughter, who thought she was taking a Xanax, and died. She actually only took half of it as part of her study routine and died of fentanyl overdose. That has led to a murder charge in Riverside County, and our district attorney is prosecuting that. How it will end, we'll see, but it certainly is an example of the kind of response that I hope both the federal government and the state and local will start looking, that these people who traffic in that, leading to these tragic deaths, are more than just drug dealers, they're murderers. And I want to thank you for being here today. Sheriff, I'm going to primarily talk to you because the judge, I think rightfully so, gave us a good example of facilitating undocumented workers who have been released in this country getting around the country and all the humanitarian work they do. First of all, are those the people you run into?
Congressman, it's not. We don't give the give-ups. I can't remember, speaking with our Border Patrol CBP agents, we don't get give-ups in Cochise County. What we get is the gotaways, the ones that are camouflaged 100% from booty to headgear, that fight and flight, do whatever it takes to get away from us.
So out of 5 million people that have come here, we could be talking, the judge could be talking about 1 million who just want opportunity, maybe jobs. But that's not who you're dealing with. You're dealing with the other at least 1 million who are often repeat criminals and are evading in order to perpetrate crimes.
That is correct.
I want to go through a couple of quick quotes because you're at the border. I, too, am at the border. I have a little over 50 miles of the Mexican border in California. And so these quotes are particularly important to me. The Secretary of Homeland Security said, "The border is closed, the border is secure," in March of 2021. Was that true then?
No.
Is it true now?
No.
He additionally said, "We are working day in and day out to enhance its security." He said that November 16, 2022. Had you seen that kind of improvement?
No, I have not.
You haven't as of today. Just a few days ago, he said, "The border is not open." Would you agree with that?
No, and if I could support that statement also, the majority of people, just to give an example, we have an interdiction team that goes out almost daily. Yesterday, they were out for their shift, had 15 smuggling events. We had a media crew riding with them yesterday. And the majority of people we talk to, the migrants that have been smuggled, which I call modern-day slavery, what they're doing to these people, they tell us the reason they're here is because President Biden and the welcoming sign.
Now, the Vice President said just a few months ago, the border is secure. We have secured the border. Would that also be inaccurate?
Yes, it would.
Now, a lot of people talk about the Trump era versus now. Is it fair to say that it got better, but it was still a difficult time for you even then with some of what you were dealing with at the border?
Yes, after 38, almost 48 years of working this border, I've seen the good and the bad, the ugly. It was better under President Trump. This is, like I said, this is the worst I've seen, mainly because of the aggression by the cartels and the aggravated acts toward law enforcement in the community.
And I want you to take the remaining time and just tell us that difference between the Trump era and now with the border wide open. What does it do for your ability to provide law enforcement for other purposes to your county?
Well, with the amount of arrests we had in 2022, our border population, or it's been border crimes that's been arrested and booked in my jail, equates to about 40 to 44% of all the population in my jail. You equate that back into the patrol side of it for the troopers, the local law enforcement, sheriff's office. We're spending a lot of time keeping our community safe, diverted from the normal stuff that we do, the proactive stuff, into addressing border crimes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York, Ranking Member Mr. Nadler, is recognized.
I thank the chairman for yielding. Mr. Dunn, again, I want to express my sincerest condolences to you and your family, and I want to thank you for being here today. Judge Samaniego, I want to turn to you. Thank you so much for coming today. Having a witness who has grown up and lived on the border is so imperative. Your knowledge and lived experience are invaluable for policymakers here in Washington. Unfortunately, the Republican majority seems interested only in showboating. They continuously talk about a so-called Biden border crisis, even though this administration has actually kept in place numerous policies from the Trump administration that many of my colleagues and I have expressed concerns about. Judge Samaniego, in your testimony, you note safety and compassion are not mutually exclusive. I think this is a very important point. As Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez stated over the weekend, border security and immigration are two separate topics. One can be for a strong border security presence that prevents terrorists, fentanyls, and bad actors from entering our country, and one can be for welcoming future Americans in through the front door. Judge Samaniego, can you discuss how El Paso has balanced these two competing dynamics, ensuring the safety of its citizens while also being compassionate toward migrants?
Thank you. One of the things that we recognized is our collaboration. We're not reacting at this point. We've been working 4 years. Almost every Friday we meet with law enforcement, we meet with Border Patrol, the diocese, the NGOs, and we know that by doing what we do right, the whole nation benefits from that. If we do not process the migrants properly, then it falls on other cities. I think El Paso is extremely focused on the fact that we're not a community, but a part of a nation. And if we do not do the right things, then New York gets hit and other communities get hit simply by the fact that there's an unorganized process. Our strategy is really very organized, very compassionate, and making sure that we get individuals in the right place at the right time. And so when we have someone like from New York that comes to El Paso, the mayor, to tell us to help him through this process, obviously, that's why we're there. Our impact is not just on our community. Our impact, I believe, it's on the values of our Constitution, the values, in my case, as a Democrat, and we make sure that we're helping the rest of the country. We don't do things right, and I can guarantee you that the impact is going to fall on the other cities around the country.
Thank you. We keep hearing from our Republican colleagues that the border is open and that Biden caused this crisis. Could you comment on this?
Well, we don't see that. We process every individual that comes through. We make sure we coordinate. We get a lot of information. And I must emphasize, it was the Border Patrol and the federal government that asked us to step up as a community. And when we don't do the right things, it backs up their system. They start getting more and more people. The detention centers are extremely limited compared to what a community can do. So either you put the pressure on the federal government or you put the pressure on a community that has, almost 14 sites where we could get people sheltered. We can process people, like I said, 35 to 40% are individuals that already have a sponsor, they have money, and they can move into the communities and other communities. We get a lot of calls of a lot of states and cities throughout the country that want migrants. And if we do the right thing and we process them, then we could get the migrants to them as well as to help our community. And we talk about three things. It's safety, which is extremely important for our community, humanitarianism, and the economy. We do not do things right, and I can guarantee you it impacts the entire economy. We've seen it when things begin strained and the movement of product doesn't come into the country. We get hit extremely hard. We get a lot of calls about not moving traffic properly, and we're one of the largest movers of products in the whole country. So we do things right, and I feel that everybody gains from our efforts.
Thank you. One of the topics you touched on in your testimony is the need for all levels of government and nonprofits to work together to effectively process the migrants who are crossing the border. Do you have a good relationship with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection? And can you discuss how often you coordinate with them?
Every once a month we help. One of the missing elements is that we don't get support from the state. And if we had the three, you need the local government, you need the federal government, and the missing component, and because of political reasons, we don't get that third part of the stool. And that is extremely, extremely important to us. We need their support. We don't need militia. We don't need policing. Our strategy has been extremely effective without using law enforcement, and we suffer tremendously by not having